For some of you ex-Baptists, we have some seats up front, and you ex-Episcopalians can sit in the back too. So whatever you want to do. But yeah, we got seats up here. One of the things I've been just announcing and just kind of highlighting is this month, our Embodied Grace kind of series for our Stewardship of Giving. And so each of y'all may have gotten one. We put them in chairs the first week, but it's really just what we're asking folks to do in the life of this community is just to pray about what they might give to the church and the ministries of the church. Last week we had 110 partners, community partners that were here, that were in the gym. That we're honoring them, and just and so we're deeply connected to the community. If you like what's happening in the Crossing, the things that we're doing here, and also whether it's the food bank or whether it's Summit in the summer, whether it's building and helping folks with wells, whether it's really the hundreds of thousands of dollars that we help with different types of aid around the world, and also in Spring Branch, then we'd really invite you to give to that and to prayerfully consider giving. That's what Michelle and I are doing this month as well. So if you have any questions about that, and let me say this. I may need to have my mic turned off for this part. So I planted a thing called Mercy Street 100 years ago, and we never asked for money because when I was interviewing folks, folks said, "Man, you people at church are always asking for money, you know." And anytime a preacher gets a mic, I start holding on to my wallet, you know, those kind of things. I get it. I think part of mature spirituality is you got to be given somewhere, right? Like, we're going to talk about this a little. We talk about this every week, that it really, like one of the things I've learned, hey, Sully, if you're back there, I'm echoing up here. One of the things that I'm learning in my own process of recovery is I don't get it until I give it away. There's that whole thing. And so that's part of it. So I'm not saying don't give to Chapwood Unitedist Church, but if you got a problem, like 101, give somewhere. Just give it into the world and let it do good. And so yeah, okay, that's it. We are in the middle of a series, really kind of on the tail end actually of a series called Movies and Memes, where we are looking at different spiritual things through the lens of movies and movie clips. And so we have looked at the whole area of friendship and community, and just what I will say, I think the deepest spiritual place that you will ever encounter God is in relationships, what I'm calling God between us, right? There is this like deep sense, I would hope, that you is building in you, that there is a God, there's a place, there's a voice, there's something in you that at different times in your life is activated where you know it's going to be okay. Often that's an internalized voice from someone that loves us when our life has just gone to all sorts of crazy sideways. But we internalize the inner voice of love. That's the work of the spiritual life. The work of the spiritual life is not to get you into heaven and not to save you from hell. The work of the spiritual life is to create more interior freedom. All right? It's so the things that you have brought in here today and that you're super worried about, that there might be another voice along the voice of anxiousness, anxiety, stress, and that voice begins to transform, help you along the way, really transform our lives together. And we do this not as individuals. As they say, this is a we program, not a me program. All right? And what we've done in the States is we've individualized our spirituality. So we've talked about friendship as the place of God between us. And that's a place where God often happens, is when we have conversations and we go there. We begin to become more curious about each other's stories. That's why Philip is saying, hey, go to lunch together. The Crossing is not Sunday morning at whenever we start. You know, I don't know when we start. The crossing is the spaces between us. And to the degree that we are risking, which is just another word for faith, right? Risking something. I'm going to risk my story. I'm going to have faith that if I tell you what I'm struggling with, what I'm carrying today, how I'm feeling, things that are bubbling up for me, that you will hold that with a compassion and a love. That's the place where God happens. And so the God between us. We've talked about marriage and the fact that you will marry the wrong person. That's a title to that teaching that I did, and you can look it up. We've talked about work last week and the juxtaposition between work and the way our culture teaches it, and this biblical counter-narrative that we're to cultivate. Our life is to be a garden, not a machine shop. Our life is to fall into the rhythms, and our work life is to fall into rhythms. So we're going to talk about that just a bit more. And today we're going to talk about money. Yay! And I want to show a clip from a movie called The Wolf of Wall Street. I had to be really creative with this clip because there's a lot of cussing in it. And so I sent it to Jeff, and he's like, a minute of that's going to be beeped out, dude. I'm like, I know. But it's like, it's a really short clip. And I think we caught them all. If we didn't, go talk to John Stevens, because it's his fault, not mine, okay? Just kidding. So this is from The Wolf of Wall Street, and is really, DiCaprio is a young trader. And he says something in this clip that really resonates with me. I don't think I would be this brash about it. I might not want you to ever know that this is somewhat the operational board in my life that I have had to contend with. But I also think it's the water that we swim in. And so this is hopefully the clean version of The Wolf of Wall Street. Let's see if I can.
Let me tell you something. There is no nobility in poverty. I have been a rich man and I have been a poor man, and I choose rich every time. Because at least as a rich man, when I have to face my problems, I show up in the back of a limo wearing a $2,000 suit and a $40,000 watch. So you listen to me and you listen well. Are you behind on your credit card bills? Good. Pick up the phone and start dialing. Is your landlord ready to evict you? Good. Pick up the phone and start dialing. I want you to deal with your problems by becoming rich. All you have to do today is pick up that phone and speak the words that I have taught you.
Whew. Okay. That's all you got to do. So if you can turn on the house lights too, thanks. Tom.
You ready?
I'm ready.
This is from First Amazon. Excuse me.
Amazon.
1 Timothy chapter 6, verse 10. For the love of money is a root of all kinds of evil, and in their eagerness to be rich, some have wandered away from the faith and pierced themselves with many pains.
And we read this text last week. It's just so good. I want to read it again this week.
Me?
I think, yes. You.
Okay.
Yeah.
Jeremiah 29. Thus said the Lord of hosts, the God of Israel, to all the exiles whom I have sent into exile from Jerusalem to Babylon, build houses, live in them, plant gardens, and eat what they produce. Take wives and have sons and daughters. Take wives for your sons and give your daughters in marriage, that they may bear sons and daughters. Multiply there and do not decrease. but seek the welfare of the city where I have sent you into exile, and pray to the Lord on its behalf, for in its welfare you will find your welfare.
Yeah.
Exodus 32. When the people saw that Moses delayed to come down from the mountain, the people gathered around Aaron and said to him, "Come, make gods for us, who shall go before us. As for this Moses, this man who brought us out of the land of Egypt, we do not know what has become of him." Aaron said to them, "Take off the gold rings that are on the ears of your wives, your sons, and your daughters, and bring them to me." So all the people took off the gold rings from their ears and brought them to Aaron. He took the gold from them, formed it in a mold, and cast an image of a calf. And they said, "These are your gods, O Israel, who brought you up out of the land of Egypt."
So one of the things I want to do today is, I'm not an economist. I don't even play one on TV. But I think that this whole thing about money and wealth and possessions, all those things, I don't want to come at it like head on, because most of the times I've heard people talk about it, one, I feel like either I have way too much or I don't have enough. There's something wrong with me. Like, I want to kind of set all that stuff aside for a moment if you can. And what I want to do is do what we do in this class, which is, I think, one, create a deep space of generous thought. Like, we're going to play with some thoughts, right? Because I'm playing with them inside of me. And so I just want us to play with some thoughts and wonder about some things in a deep curiosity. Because I think that often what Timothy says is that the love of money kind of screws everything up, right? It's not money. It's my attachment, right? Well, one of the things that Ignatius says is that he talks about, and I think this is a great way of talking about addiction. He talks about the maladies in our life as disordered attachments. And that we have disordered attachments to certain things, to certain people, to a past that we don't know how to make sense with, to things that have the tendency to be operational in our lives, but we don't know about it. And so I think that at the end of the day, money within our culture is deeply symbolic more than it is material. It becomes material. We do things with it. We evaluate each other by how much we make. Have you made it? Made it. To make it really means to establish yourself in some kind of wealth within our culture. And so there's certain ways that we talk about it. We're self-reflexive on it. Some of us in here are wondering if our dads, who may have been long since dead a long time ago, would be proud of us. Did I make it? And so we move into zip codes where the underbelly of all of the question is around competition, and that competition often breeds a type of anxiety, and then we show up at church with all this crap going on within us, and we're like, "God, will you help us?" And we don't know how to talk about not money, but what it represents in us. And so what I'd like to do today is to, in some ways, what we are attempting to do every week is to bring the unconscious into the conscious. That's really the way that John talks about it in the New Testament, is that there's a light that shines in the darkness. The darkness can't overcome it. And I used to think the light of God was like me messing around with my junior high girlfriend and my parents flicking the light on and going, "Ha ha ha!" That's the, not that I ever did that. That is a metaphor. I should have used Philip for that analogy. But I used to think that the light of God was trying to catch me doing wrong. Does that resonate with anybody? Okay. And what I'm finding out is that the love of God will never flick the lights on and cause you shame. This is what Miser Eckhart says. Any thought of God that does not bring you comfort is a lie. Any thought of God that does not bring you comfort is a lie. So all shame-based images of God, smite button, flicking lights on, scaring the crap out of you, it's a lie. And I think it's really as a tool of domination and a type of control that when Jesus shows up and says, and then Paul gets a hold of it, he says, I want to set you free. That's the whole Jesus project is about, is freedom, interior freedom, external freedom, those things matching up. And so the work of a deeper, mature spirituality is making the unconscious, the things that we are controlled by but don't know that we're controlled by, into our consciousness. And often that's a shocking thing. Right? For those of us in this room who have ever struggled with addictions, patterns of behavior that we don't know what to do, things that we'd be kind of embarrassed if somebody found out about, don't raise your hand, but internally if you're, yeah, if you've ever been in that category, that you know that often it's pain and a sense of dis-ease that brings you to a place of saying, I don't want to die. Oops, I don't want to die. I don't want to die like this. I know that I could go all of my life, and this is the way that denial works for me, is that I could hide myself in the, what is that thing called when you're looking in the rearview mirror and you can't see that? Blind spot. The blind spot. I can hide people in my blind spot, and no one would ever know the depth of Matt Russell's struggle. And I would think that when I'm 80 years old and I had gotten to the end and nobody knew that I had won, and what would be the unconscious contributor and force and mover in my life would be shame. And shame would think, I won because you never told the truth about yourself. And so the work of coming into consciousness is often a really painful thing, because we have to end up looking at the ways that we've constructed our lives, the ways we've held our identity, the ways we've held other people at bay, the way that we think that our life is for our own self-preservation, the way that our culture has kind of totally just like shaped and distorted us, that the movement from consciousness, from unconsciousness to consciousness is often a really, really painful thing. One of the places that I have come to understand this kind of movement from unconsciousness to consciousness is in some rooms that I attend. And these are what some of these folks say, is that to move in that way, you have to become aware. Awareness. You will not be able to grow. You will not be able to become more free. You will not be able to, those desires that in your heart that wake you up at 3 in the morning and you think, does it have to be like this? You won't understand what path to take until you become aware. And so the awareness of God, a light that shines in the darkness, unconsciousness to consciousness, takes a long time for some of us. A lot of compassion. I was going to say a crap load of compassion. That's a lot more than a lot, just in terms of the weight and measurements. And it takes the God between us of other people to help us get there. Does that make sense? You're going from unconsciousness to consciousness, from a sense of darkness and not knowing what to do, and shame-based or anxious-based or depressed-based or whatever that is, into the transformation of a more mature human being where you are flourishing in the very sight of God. It takes a long time. It takes an exorbitant amount of commitment to being aware. This is what Paul says. Why do I do the things I don't want to do? Great question. It's not an easy answer because you're a dirty, rotten sinner, right? No. Any thought about God that does not bring you comfort, it's a lie. We have to come to an acceptance within that as well. An acceptance that this is the way I have held my life, the way I have gotten things that I have needed, that I have not known how to be honest about, the ways and things and shadows that are in operation of my life, acceptance. And often that acceptance comes, again, in a long, compassionate road where I am able, as the Holy Spirit turns up the dimmer switch of the light of His absolute, irresistible, compassionate tenderness, and I'm able to see myself. I'm also able to see it in a field of absolute tender love. And it's at that point I can release, I can surrender, I can let go. Does that make sense? That's very different than the God of shame that many of us have ingested, walking in on your junior high kind of, thing and flipping the lights off and catching you. And then out of that awareness and acceptance, we can begin to take action. Fragile action, nascent action, action that scares us. We learn phrases like, okay, I'm just going to do the next right thing. I don't know where this is going to lead. I just have to do the next right thing. And so this movement from unconsciousness to consciousness usually involves those three steps. This is what Carl Jung says. Our greatest sin is choosing to remain unconscious. Our greatest sin is that Matt Russell could have been an 80-year-old man having hidden his secrets all in the backyard of his life unmarked. And I could have hosted parties in my backyard, and y'all would have never known what was underneath the subterranean terrain of my life, and I could have gotten to 80 and thought I had won. And I think God face palms himself and says, oh, crap. Get found. Do the work. Don't hide. Find yourself in relationship. Find the things that are controlling you underneath the ground and begin over time and over a lot of love and relationships, the God between you in these places, get found. Let those things that are unconscious become conscious. Does that make sense? Okay, that's the core of what I think the spiritual life is. That's the core of it. When you strip it all down, I think what we see in Jesus is a deeply conscious person. Where all of these categories in the New Testament about who you're supposed to eat with and what you're supposed to... They killed this dude not because he was handing out Big Macs and starting a free health clinic. They killed this dude because he would not live within the categories of his culture and the religious structure. He was free. And so the religious folks said, oh, that man eats with prostitutes and tax collectors and lawyers and all those other evil people in this room. Because he would not fit into the dominant cultural mode of what religion meant. And they killed him by religion. They killed God, was killed because of religion. And then you have the Romans. He would not conform to the cultural norms of this. And it became a deep threat to the empire and to the system. When you become conscious, you become a deep threat to those that are wanting to remain asleep. And your consciousness, your unconsciousness does more harm to yourself and to those around you than I think anything else. And so I think that our lives depend on forming, loving, being in, committing to relationships where this dynamic can begin to happen more and more. Right? And this is the core of the spiritual life. This is not the parking lot anymore, folks. This is the things that constitute you growing up, flourishing, becoming more mature in what it means to be in Christ, as Paul says. There's a cartoon I came by a while ago, which is really just about this, right? Two goldfish, we need to change the water. What water? You know, there's a sense in which sometimes fish, there's that old philosophical conundrum. Does a fish know that they're in water? Right? Some of you guys have never gone into a philosophy class. You're going, what? Hang with me. That would it be, in fact, that there is environments where we just think this is normal. This is how you do it. And there's no ability to become aware of alternative ways of living and being and seeing in the world. What water? This is how it is. Right? And so our minds can become, this is what they talk about in neurobiology and neuropsychology, the difference between a flexible mindset and a solid or irretractable or solid mindset. There's the only way to see it. This is it. And part of growth is understanding that we're swimming in water. What's the water we swim in? How is it defining us? What claim is it making on our life? How does it constitute the ways that we make relationship, the ways of depth that we can go, when it's time to step out of relationships, what it means to be a man or a woman in this world, what it means to have a person, what is success measured by? All of those things are the water that we swim in. And that often what we do with our spirituality is our spirituality just becomes a minor narrative within the bigger water park that we're in that helps us get through that, helps us make sure that we stay in that water. In some ways, as I said before, that often religion then becomes an epidural against the pain. It keeps you asleep. And part of when Jesus rocks into the world, the things he's doing is he's like healing blind folks. This has nothing to do with ocular correction. It has everything to do with being woken up. It has everything to do with becoming something and aware of a way that you're living that God says, this is not as good as it gets. And so often what happens is that we can look at our spiritual life either as Ginkgo or transformation. You know what Ginkgo is? It's like a supplement. It's like when I was growing up, it was that kind of supplement that did everything. Take a little Ginkgo, it's going to make your joints better, it's going to make you taller, your hair's going to start growing, or whatever, right? It's just a little supplement to help you out along the way. It's a little boost. That's all I need, right? That's free. Okay. Or is the very spiritual life for transformation? Actually, by all part and parcel, I was taught that the spiritual life, really what I needed was just a little help. Just get over the sticking point. And that what Jesus was, what the spiritual life was to be that thing that gave me the edge when other people were flaming out. And that kind of idea of spiritual life as a supplement really causes us to think that Jesus is coming to the world to optimize our lives. He's basically a really old Joe Rogan. That's what Jesus is, right? He's here just to optimize your life. Or to make us cozy. The goal of Jesus, the goal of spiritual life is to make us cozy. And because of that, the focus is always going to be on otherworldliness. It's not about now. It's actually about getting people out of now into there. And I want to say that that is a gross distortion, a gross mishandling of the gift of truth that God has given communities. When we push all of our spiritual life out there to another place, to another time, where it doesn't have a claim on our lives. And I believe that really the New Testament is calling us, and really probably the whole of the canon of Scripture is calling us to imagine a new way of acting in this world, really to see really the Bible as this counter-narrative, this other narrative that comes up against the water we're swimming in and says, let me tell you about the water you're swimming in. Not to shame you, but to say, you're going to run up to limitations within that. And there's other ways of thinking, there's other ways of acting and being and relating that will create a deeper sense of your own internal freedom. And it will not come without pain. It will not come without reflection. But it will always, in the end result, create a deeper sense of community and freedom. And I could make a case that the whole of the Bible creates an alternative worldview than the one that we have been acculturated into. But often it is distorted. Often the biblical narrative comes into employment by the larger narrative that says this: you've got to secure your own life. You are what you make. It's all about competition. There's no nobility if you're not rich. And if you're anything like me, I don't want to talk about that. It's just in freaking operation underneath my life. And that often what religion will do, instead of saying, hey, can we talk about this? Because what's underneath that is me, is my security, is what money represents. Can you secure your own life? Can I secure the life of my family? That's the only thing, me. And then religion becomes this place that just kind of baptizes our own anxiety. And we don't understand that there's other ways of living and being in this world. That we don't have to have a disordered attachment to the things that we possess. That there can be an interior freedom in the way that we spend and make and understand money. That you don't have to be subconsciously controlled by the fact that you never think that there's going to be enough. Always wondering, when are you going to be successful? What does success look like? And often these are the legacies that we pass down to our children. This is a legacy that was passed down from my great-grandfather to my grandfather to my father to me. These are the legacies unspoken often. Some of them are very spoken. We pass them down. This is what success means. And I think all along the Bible comes and really offers a counter-narrative. I think, number one, to expose our phony worldviews. To expose the way that we have really understood what it means to be human and the way that we move into this world. And to say, as Paul says in 1 Corinthians, let me show you, actually 1 Corinthians 12, let me show you a more excellent way. He's talking about the ways the whole society's set up and laws and all this stuff. And then he gets to this place in the middle of Corinth and he says, let me show you a more excellent way. And he begins to talk about the way that the world is really spins on the axis of God's tenderness, not on our control. It's on God's grace, not on you being able to kick butt, not on if you're a winner or if you're a loser. And these types of paradigms have so shaped us that they've deformed us. And so the Bible is to expose these phony ways that we've been living and really to imagine a different alternative. We might imagine a different way of being. We might show up into the world and in the crossing going, oh, this is helpful. These are the ways that this stuff has been operational in my life. And as the light gets a little brighter in my life, I can get more free and walk in more freedom in my life. I don't think this has anything to do with money. I think money is a symbol that represents the way that we hold our own sense of security and value. And I think at the end of the day, it's really hard for you and I to trust anything else besides ourselves, besides what we've made, besides the house that we've built on our foundation. And that place becomes a very anxious place, a distorted place, and a place that's full of kind of internal competition. And out of that, I think, comes this kind of narrative that I'm calling a scarcity narrative, which is based on competition, limited resources, me, anxiety. And I think it pervades our common life. So much so that we define ourselves. Often, there's this pecking order that we carry around, I think, and we kind of define ourselves by and each other by that kind of pecking order. And it's all built on this narrative of really of scarcity. The paradigmatic story is a story in Exodus where Pharaoh has this empire, and he's enslaved the Jewish people for hundreds upon hundreds of years, and they've lived in this culture, and every generation is just swimming in the water of empire. And so nothing exists, nothing good can exist outside of empire. And they're living in a deeply scarce narrative where the only thing that good can come can be what Pharaoh gives. Pharaoh owns all the food. He employs all the folks. And in fact, there's this crazy story in Exodus chapter 20 where Moses comes along and goes to Pharaoh and says, hey, these dudes, we'd like to go for like 3 days out into the desert. And we want to be able to worship our God out there. And we're going to come back. We're going to take a little retreat. Is that cool? And Pharaoh goes nuts. Not only is it not cool, he says, I'm going to take away the hay that you're using to build these bricks for the pyramids, but I'm not going to lower the quota. If you got so much time to think about a retreat, you got more time to work, son. And that's exactly what happens. And so there is no alternative narrative within a narrative of scarcity. You've got to be working all the time. Your life is dependent on it. Your success is dependent on it. Your value is dependent on it. Who people think you are is dependent on it. And so these, the children of Israel are enculturated, are shaped in this deep narrative of scarcity. And it totalizes their imagination. There's not another thought that they are able to have. And I think that the dominant tools or the tools of scarcity are really domination and control. That you have to become the master of your own domain. You have to control the situation and the outcome. Even if it's volatile, you're thinking of ways of always controlling. It's one of my other favorite theologians from Talladega Nights, Ricky Bobby, who says, if you ain't first, you're last, right? If you're second, you're the first loser. And often in that kind of economy, that kind of structure, that kind of water, the symbol is a triangle. There's a top and there's a bottom. And it's good to be on the top. And so often what that means is that we employ domination and control to be there. And what happens in the story of Exodus is that it's really interesting to me that when the children of Israel are moved out into exile, really what they are shocked is that God provides for life outside this mindset in the form of manna. There's no supply chain from Pharaoh into the wilderness, and they're wondering how they're going to eat. And within 2 days of let's get the heck out of Dodge, 2 days in, and they've missed a meal, they start freaking out. Because a new mindset, going through detox of a mindset is a really difficult thing. And what God is after is not just Ginkoba to get us up and over a certain issue in our life. It's for the transformation of our very souls. That we might, at the very base of our life, be able to surrender our one and only life to the care of God and understand that God provides for us outside of the kill or be killed mentality, outside that I am what I make, outside of how you will judge me because I live in this zip code and you live in that zip code. Judge me because we think that our children are our own report cards. We live in this mindset that's killing us. And the biblical narrative comes over and over and over and over to help us to reimagine our place in this world. Our way in this world. And that, as we have talked about week after week, that what we're doing is just walking each other home. And there are people in this room that are scared spitless about money, making enough, is there going to be enough? There are people in this room wondering, I got enough, now what? And there's also this other call that so many of you are doing that we're doing together. We're doing this together, folks. Is how do we realize that God provides for us outside of the mentality of this totalizing way that our culture says, this is who you are. This is how you evaluate yourself. And they get into the desert and they realize God shows up with manna. Like meat flies in the form of quail. That they knock on a rock and rock breaks open. And that the water of Egypt was actually so limiting to them and killing them. They were still slaves. Slaves to their own desires, slaves to their own unconsciousness. I don't care how much money you make. And money ain't the issue. It's about being free. It's about understanding that there's a different economy between scarcity, and I think what the New Testament and the Old Testament continues to say is there's a different way of structuring this to neighborliness, to being together, to understanding that we belong to each other. And I think at the core of what God wants to do is to allow us to see all the ways that are in operation about the ways that we're afraid of trusting, all the ways that we're afraid of moving into places where this mindset might be exposed. Because you know what I'm afraid of? I'm afraid that what's going to happen is that Jesus might tell me that I got to go be a missionary somewhere, or do that thing that he did, that rich young ruler, which is give away all that you have. Because underneath it, I don't trust. And here's what I think God wants to do. I don't think that God's going to say, sell it all. I think that may be something you choose to do with your money or not do based on your freedom, based on your disordered attachments to be able to say, oh, at the Crossing, we live in a neighborhood and in neighborhoods where we need to be asking, who is my neighbor? How do we love each other? How do we slow down the pace of our work life and go to lunch with one another and ask us, tell me how you really are? To step out of that mindset that I got to work 80 hours and I am what I make, because it's killing us. And often, it's not until we get into the desert, until our life blows up, until we get something that we've really wanted and realize it's nothing we've ever needed. And we say, surely there's got to be a more excellent way. So the work of the spiritual life is always raising from unconsciousness to consciousness. Always from light, from darkness to light. And it's done in community. It's done in relationships. It's done by asking these questions. Who's at the core of my life? What do I trust? And God, I think that what I'm trusting are the things I make, the titles I wear, the security that I have in the bank. And how might you free me of that configuration that I might be more useful in this world? I'm just playing with this stuff. I don't know. I don't know if anybody else struggles with this. But it's the waters I've swam in for a long time. And I got to tell you, I'm not going to make it without you. I will BS the heck out of you people with my spiritual brilliance. Does this make sense? We will BS the heck out of each other where we are strong, so that we will hide from each other. And it's too easy to say, money's wrong, give to the church. That's the answer. The question is that God wants to reimagine this world. And some of y'all have taught me how you're doing that. And we need to share stories with each other about those reimaginations and walk with each other in this, so that we all might be free. All right, that's what I got.